Hi everyone, this is a video about English Language GCSE, Paper 1, Explorations in Creative Reading and Writing. This is a video for those of you who are working at home to work through this lesson, and it's going to take you through the work that's linked to English Language question 2. I'll talk about the questions a little bit first of all. So you've done this paper before, so the skills on this paper are as follows. They work up in terms of challenge, so we start with the simpler questions and they get progressively harder, more challenging because they're worth more marks. The text is always fiction, so it's always a story extract or a short story. And as I say, the questions increase in challenge, working all the way up. The reason being that there are no tiers in English language, so instead everybody sits the same paper and instead the questions get progressively harder to help separate out students in terms of the marks achieved across the 80 marks available. So we start with question 1, list 4 things. That's a really simple retrieval question. You're asked to pick out 4 things from a short section about a keyword. We've then got question 2, analysing language, where I'm picking out language devices and then analysing them, talking about their specific effects on the reader. Then question 3 is analysing structure. If I'm analysing structure, I'm talking about how the text is put together. So I might be looking at things like repeated motifs or cyclical structures or chronological structures or narrowing perspectives, things like that. For question 4, this is the big question and it's worth 50% of the marks in the reading section, so 20 out of 40 marks is for evaluating a statement. So you'll get a statement that you need to argue that you agree or disagree with, or both. You can juggle both sides if you want to and say you partially agree, but you also disagree. But it's also a language question or a structure question as well. It's also asking you to analyse the writer's methods. How do they achieve that idea that's in the statement or not? So, as I say, those are the 4 questions. You can see them a bit more clearly there. But why are we doing these? How are these going to help me improve other areas of my GCSE English? Well, about 50% of your English language GCSE is about analysing texts, unseen texts. So that's being able to analyse devices, draw inferences and conclusions, and explain quotations. But 100% of your English literature GCSE is analysis of text. It's just a large proportion of it is analysis of seen text. That means text that you've read in class previously. In this case, these are texts that will be brand new. These are unseen texts. Not only that, but because we're reading a whole range of fiction during this part of the unit, it's really going to help improve your writing too, because you get to see the great styles of great writers, see great voices they create, how they use their style. And so seeing that writer's voice really helps you, because the best writers always read. If people are good writers, it's because they've seen brilliant turns of phrase in things that they've read for pleasure. So the more you can read at home, the better. But this unit will also help you with that, because you're going to see lots of short text extracts from different books and short stories. We've also got retrieval skills on this paper, and we're going to start just with a really quick task. This is taken from The Road by Cormac McCarthy. In this text that we're going to have a look at, just a very short section, you're going to retrieve some information from the text to answer 5 short comprehension questions. The Road is a dystopian text. You'll know what the word dystopian means from your study of Lord of the Flies. It means a world in which everything is chaos and disorder. And so this story is about a father and his young son travelling across America, but it's a post-apocalyptic America. It's an America after a disaster. The majority of the population has been killed, the environment has been destroyed and ravaged, and in this extract they pass an old gas station on the road. So I'm going to show you then the extract itself, the short extract. You've got 5 questions. If you're doing this via the video, then now is the moment for you to pause as soon as I display it, and you're going to retrieve the information for those 5 questions below. This is because this links to the first skill on the paper, which is just picking out information. Okay, so the answers. What was the boy doing when the man returned? He was still asleep. He was sleeping. What does the man pull off the boy? He pulls a plastic tarp off the boy, a blue plastic tarp. What 3 things does a man come back with from the grocery cart? He has a plastic bag, some plates, some cornmeal cakes, and a plastic bottle of syrup. What does the man take away from his belt and lay on the cloth? He takes a pistol from his belt. And what has the boy pulled away from his face during the night? It's a mask. covering his face. So if you've got those 5 answers there, this is a test for the kind of skill that you'll use on paper 1, question 1, where you're just retrieving information quickly. So give yourself a mark out of 5 for the correct answers that you got there. Okay, let's move on. So this lesson we're going to revise and develop our language analysis skills. AO2 is a really important skill, not only in language but in literature, and it's about being able to identify language devices and analyse their effect on the reader. So we need to think about how well you can do these skills, because this is almost a bit of a self-audit around how well you're progressing with your GCSE skills. So can I identify smaller devices? And if I want to push myself even further, can I identify smaller, precise ones? When I pick out a single word, can I say not the word something, but can I say the dynamic verb, the semantic field, the abstract noun? Can I use precise devices for my language point? Can I select quotations? And again, to move yourself even further, can you include micro quotations, which is single words, a range of words put together that build up an overall theme or that contribute to a particular effect, because that's going to help you hit the top band. Can I write specific detailed analysis about effects? That's about the effect on the reader. The reader is king. What does it do to the reader? What thoughts, feelings and images does it evoke in their minds? And we need to make sure that we're not using vague language that just creates a clear picture, makes it stand out, creates a good effect, because those are things we're not going to get any marks for. So what I want you to do now is just in the middle of your page to write the word language devices, and around the outside, please, I want you to jot down any language devices you can think of. So I'll start you off. For instance, you might have simile, but you might have grammatical devices like nouns or verbs. So which other language devices do you know? There might be devices that are used to persuade, to describe, or there might be some of those single word devices. So just pause here, and while you're paused, just spend 2-3 minutes jotting down as many as you can. This is your brain splurge moment now. Okay, so some of the ones that you might have got could be things like grammatical terms, nouns, either concrete or abstract, verbs, dynamic or stative, adverbs, usually ly words, adjectives such as emotive adjectives, evaluative adjectives, descriptive adjectives. Now, if you don't know what any of these terms are as we reveal them, rather than me talking about every single type of language device that's specified on here, these are all in a separate document, a separate file that's on the VLE, which is called language devices. Okay, and in there you've got all the definitions, all the examples that you could need to help you understand these terms that you can access on your own. You also might have figurative devices and imagery. These are ones that you often use to describe. They're often ones that you find in fiction when you're analysing literature texts. So things like simile, symbolism, pathetic fallacy, sensory language, metaphor, personification, imagery. You might know some sound devices, phonological terms to do with sounds. Phonological is an A-level term actually. It's something that we use to describe the sounds of a language. So alliteration, assonance, sibilance, onomatopoeia. It might be sentence types and sentence structures, exclamative, imperatives, listing, parallel phrasing, minor sentences. Again, all of these you can find on that document. Contrasts such as oxymoron and juxtapositions and binary oppositions. So all of those are different language devices. Now, as I say, you can find all of the information about all of these different kinds of devices, or you can just do a little search on Google if there's any of these that aren't familiar to you. But this is a really good range of language devices that if you know them at GCSE, you should be able to analyse any text. But I'm going to show you some hints and tips later on for just in case when you're analysing you think, oh no, I can't find any devices, but we'll talk about that in a moment. So we're going to do a quick quiz now. Write the numbers 1 to 8 on your paper. Just have a pause while you do that. And there's going to be 8 questions. Now 6 of those questions are going to be which one is the odd one out. So there will be an example of a language device with a definition, and there will be 4 examples, A, B, C and D. One of those examples is an incorrect example. Your job is to work out which one that is. So which is the incorrect example here? Simile, a comparison between 2 things using like or as. So which one of these is not a simile? He followed silently like a lion stalking its prey. My love is like a rose which blooms in spring. The collision of metal on metal was as loud as a jackhammer pummeling the pavement. She pulled her coat around her as she hurried towards the office. And the answer, of course, in this case is D, because there, as is not used as a comparison, it's used as a connective, it's used as a conjunction between the main clause, she pulled her coat around her, and the subordinate clause, as she hurried towards the office. So in that case, the as is not a comparison. But in A, he's being compared to a lion. In B, the love is being compared to a rose. And in C, the sound is being compared to the sound of a jackhammer when those big drills pummeling a pavement. So those three are all similes, but D is not. So give yourself a mark if you got that one correct. Metaphor is a more direct comparison, not using like or as. It often uses is or was or were for a more direct comparison. My love is a rose which blooms in spring. Juliet is the sun, taken from Romeo and Juliet. The child was overjoyed at the sight of his presence. His eyes were windows, allowing her to peer into his soul. And for a metaphor, we need to think about, is the comparison meant literally? When we say something is something else, is it literally that thing? Or is it being compared to that thing directly for a visual effect in terms of the imagery it creates? And the answer to this one is C. C is not a metaphor. It's saying the child was overjoyed, but overjoyed is an adjective to describe the child. It's not saying that he is something else. Whereas in A, it's saying his love is a rose. In B, it's saying Juliet is the sun, well, she's not literally the sun. His eyes were windows, well, they're not literally windows. So in that case, these three must be metaphors, but C is not. Again, give yourself a mark if you got that one correct. 3 is personification, where an inanimate object is described using human characteristics. The car wheezed as it crawled up the hill. The wind roared through the trees. The spindly limbs of the ancient oak tree rattled against the window. The radiant sun shone down from the unbroken blue sky. So think about the inanimate things in each one of those sentences. The car, so the car's inanimate, it's not living, but it wheezed. Is that something a human would do? The wind roared. So the wind is not living, but it roared. Is that something a living thing would do? The spindly limbs of the ancient oak tree rattled against the window. It's a tree and it's got limbs. So is that like it's being made human or made as though it were alive? And then D, the sun shone down from the blue sky. Is that as though it's living? It's shining down. Is that something that humans do, or something that something living might do, an animal might do? So it's D. D is the one that's not personification. The radiant sun shining down, it's not making it human or animate and alive at all. It's just describing what the sun was doing, how the sun was shining. Okay. Binary opposition is where two direct opposites are used to contrast one another. So you've got juxtaposition, which is where you've got contrast created in the text, where you've got contrasting ideas. You can call it juxtaposition, you can call it contrast. The two things are broadly the same. There is a slight distinction, but generally you can use the same term. But binary opposition is two complete opposites. It comes from the idea of binary code being created by ones and zeros. Okay, you might have heard of the idea of binary code in science or technology. So we've got innocence and terror. Are those two things complete opposites? We've got heaven and hell. Are they complete opposites? We've got good and evil. Are they complete opposites? We've got sorrow and joy. Are they complete opposites? And the correct answer this time is A, innocence and terror, because they're not complete opposites. They are broadly contrasting. They're two different ideas. One is a pleasant idea, one is an unpleasant idea, but they're not polar opposites. The polar opposite of innocence is guilt. The supposedly binary opposite of terror might be comfort. Okay, so that's certainly not a binary opposition. Number 5, an abstract noun. So a noun is a thing. If you can put at or the in front of it, you've got a noun. But an abstract noun is a thought, a feeling, or an idea, something you can't physically see, taste, or touch. So these are all nouns because you can say the terror, the love, the city, the joy. Okay, so they must be nouns. But which one is a thing that you can physically see, or touch, or taste, or hear? And the one that is not an abstract noun, therefore, is city. Because city isn't an abstract feeling or idea. It's something that you can physically see in front of you. You can see a city, you can hear it. Okay? And finally, number 6 on these ones, a dynamic verb. So a verb is a doing word. If it's a physical action that involves movement, it's a dynamic verb. So running, dancing, for instance, those dynamic verbs. But we can have present participle verbs that end in ing, or we can just have present tense verbs like these ones. And these are actually infinitive verbs as well. So to drive, to dream, to swim, to punch. Okay, if you study French or Spanish, you'll be familiar with those, or German, you'll be familiar with the word infinitive. So if we have a look at these examples, which ones are physical movements? To drive, to dream, to swim, or to punch? And the only one that's not a physical movement is dream. Dream is not something we can physically see. It doesn't involve dynamic movement. It's a kind of process, an abstract process that's to do with thought and things that happen concealed within the brain, things that can't be seen occurring. And so we're going to have a look now for number 7 and 8 at semantic fields. Semantic fields are really important. I'll talk about why they're important a little bit later on. But a semantic field is a linked group of words that share the same topic. They build up a mood or an idea across a text. So they're linked words that are linked by topic. What semantic field do these words share? You cannot use one of the words from the list. So for instance, you can't say a semantic field of love because the word love is already in the list. So what might your semantic field be? A semantic field of something. So in a group of words like love, gifts, kiss, marriage, anniversary, roses, and date, have a think. What topic connects those words? A semantic field of what? And if you put something like a semantic field of romance or a semantic field of courtship or something like that, then, or a semantic field of relationships, then yeah, absolutely that would work. For number 8, school, toys, memories, family, books, games, sports, cartoon. What topic connects those words? And the semantic field of childhood would be the correct answer. Those are all things that you do or enjoy during your childhood, things that are important to you when you're a child. Okay, so give yourself a mark out of 8. How well did you do on our language devices quiz? And then we'll move on. Now, one thing that I just want us to be aware of is some of you might be thinking, well, I'm not very good at identifying language devices. And what do I do if I can't find any when I know that I'm going to be being assessed for AO2 and the examiner is going to be looking for devices in my answer? Now, I could just say the use of certain words. I could say emotional words, happy words, sad words, but that's really going to limit the mark that I'm going to get. So I can use these 4 devices always. These are always going to get you out of trouble, because if you're sat in an exam thinking I can't find anything, there will always be some of these. So the first one is emotive language. If something sounds powerful and it creates feelings, really powerfully chosen words to make you feel happy or sad or anything like that, even if you're not sure what the specific device is, you can always say the emotive language. So the emotive language cruelly stolen suggests. I don't need to know what kind of words cruelly stolen are, but I know they're meant to make me feel a certain way. They're meant to be powerful and evoke my emotions. Another thing, nouns, verbs and adjectives are in every single text. Every text will have things, so test it out, put the or at in front of words. If we know it's a noun, we can say the noun. If you are more confident, you can use terms like abstract noun or concrete noun. Every single text has verbs, doing words, and those are actually often very powerful, particularly if they're dynamic and they're to do with movements. And finally, adjectives describing words can be really important, and every single text will have some of every type. So once you feel confident identifying those, you know they're always going to be in the text. Another thing that will really get you out of trouble is semantic fields, and not only that, this will really help you because you'll be able to talk about specific micro quotations. And the micro quotations, the single words that you have to pick out to evidence a semantic field, are going to help you access the higher levels in the mark scheme, because it actually says judicious quotes in the top band, which means single words. So I could say semantic field of nature, semantic field of suffering, semantic field of joy, but there must be at least 3 words anywhere across the text that share those 3 words, share that theme, sorry. 2, just about at a push, but you can't just put a full phrase in and say the semantic field. If it's a phrase rather than single words, I would advise saying something imagery. So natural imagery, romantic imagery, violent imagery. If it's a whole phrase and you can't pick out single words, but you're not sure what device it is, that can also get you out of trouble. And if you think about writing 3 paragraphs, if you were to say, firstly, the writer uses emotive language, secondly, the writer uses a semantic field of nature, thirdly, the writer uses romantic imagery, those will be 3 devices for your 3 paragraphs. So if you get stuck, that will always get you out of trouble. That's a good lesson just to remember. Okay, so today's extract that we're going to read is Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. It's another dystopian novel, because I've taken that theme this week, and it was published in 1953. It presents, again, a dystopian version of America, but it's a world in which books have been outlawed and firemen burn any that are found. And in the Second World War, book burning was very common in terms of destroying of any books that were deemed to be not in keeping with, say, Nazi propaganda, for instance, by the Nazis. So book burning was something that was very much at the front of the consciousness of the people. And so Ray Bradbury really tied into that by writing about this world in which books had been outlawed and people couldn't learn about their pasts and people couldn't spread the word about things that they felt strongly about in the way that often happens through books. And this is a really important book, actually. Even Barack Obama has made comments about this being one of his favourite books, and said that his way of thinking really reshaped culture and expanded the world and helped him to see things differently. If you want to watch the clip there is a YouTube clip. It's just the Fahrenheit 451 trailer, and it is a movie from 2018, so it's quite modern, but it introduces you to the themes, just if that helps you to understand the extracts a little bit better. So we're going to read the extract first of all. So this is from the perspective of a fireman named Montague. Montague is one of the men who is a fireman commissioned with burning these books. And so it opens in his voice. These are the first words from him. It's in his perspective. So we'll read it first, and then we'll focus in on the type of question and what we're going to do in terms of picking out language devices. It was a pleasure to burn. It was a special pleasure to see things eaten, to see things blackened and changed. With the brass nozzle in his fists, with his great python spitting its venomous kerosene upon the world, the blood pounded in his head, and his hands were the hands of some amazing conductor, playing all the symphonies of blazing and burning to bring down the tatters and charcoal of history. With his symbolic helmet, number 451 on his stolid head, and his eyes all orange flame with the thought of what came next, he flicked the igniter, and the house jumped up in a gorging fire that burned the evening sky red and yellow and black. He strode in a swarm of fireflies. He wanted, above all, like the old joke, to shove a marshmallow on a stick in the furnace while the flapping pigeon-winged books died on the porch and lawn of the house, while the books went up in sparkling whirls and blew away on a wind turned dark with burning. Montague grinned the fierce grin of all men singed and driven back by flame. He knew that when he returned to the firehouse he might wink at himself, a minstrel man, burnt corked in the mirror. Later, going to sleep, he would feel the fiery smile, still gripped by his face muscles in the dark. It never went away, that smile. It never, ever went away, as long as he remembered. He hung up his black beetle-coloured helmet and shined it. He hung his flame-proof jacket neatly. He showered luxuriously and then, whistling, hands in pockets, walked across the upper floor of the fire station and fell down the hole. At the last moment, when disaster seemed positive, he pulled his hands from his pockets and broke his fall by grasping the golden pole. He slid to a squeaking halt, the heels 1 inch from the concrete floor downstairs. He walked out of the fire station and along the midnight street towards the subway, where the silent, air-propelled train slid sidelessly down its lubricated flue in the earth, and let him out with a great puff of warm air into the cream-tiled escalator rising to the suburb. Whistling, he let the escalator waft him into the still night air. He walked toward the corner, thinking little at all about nothing in particular. Before he reached the corner, however, he slowed as if a wind had sprung up from nowhere, as if someone had called his name. The last few nights he had had the most uncertain feelings about the sidewalk just around the corner here, moving in the starlight toward his house. He had felt that a moment before his making the turn, someone might be there. The air seemed charged with a special calm, as if someone had waited there quietly, and only a moment before he came, simply turned to a shadow and let him through. Perhaps his nose detected a faint perfume. Perhaps the skin on the backs of his hands, on his face, felt the temperature rise at this one spot where a person standing might raise the immediate atmosphere 10 degrees for an instant. There was no understanding it. Each time he made the turn, he saw only the white, unused, buckling sidewalk, with, perhaps, on one night, something vanishing swiftly across a lawn before he could focus his eyes or speak. So we're going to have a look at a particular extract. Question 2 will always ask you to look at one particular short section, and it will ask you to pick out how the writer uses language to describe something, and it will give you a keyword. So in this one it says, how does the writer use language here to describe the fire and its effect on Montague? And just for ease there, I've just highlighted for you the keywords. So it's about language, about the fire, and its effect on Montague. So as long as the quotations are about the fire, about the impact that the fire has on Montague, then I can select any quotations that I like. And so there's just a short section there. Now you can do the harder version here, which is your job now is to select 3 quotations with language devices in, because for question 2 I would advise you to do 3 paragraphs. If you can only do 2, no problem at all, but make sure you've also got a language device in your language point. If you can do 3, brilliant. I always say select 3 quotations and then number them in terms of the ones that you think you can say the most about, just in case you run out of time, because this is only a 10-minute question in the real exam. So you can do the harder version here, which is to reread that short extract without anything highlighted in advance for you, or if you're not happy with that, you don't have to pause just yet. You can go on to the next slide where I display the ones that have the highlighted bits to guide you towards particular quotations that could be helpful for you to look for devices within. So remind yourself of those devices that we jotted down before. You're looking for 3. If you prefer, here is a support version with some of the quotations highlighted that you might want to annotate. Okay, so you might have picked up on some of these things. This great python, this amazing conductor, all the symphonies of blazing and burning. Now, the great python spitting its venomous kerosene upon the world is a metaphor, but it's actually a metaphor about the fire hose that Montague is using. But in this case, he refers to it as a python. So even though it's not directly about the fire, it does tell us about how he feels about this job that he's got to do, about this role. He describes himself as well as an amazing conductor, playing all the symphonies of blazing and burning. So I could look at those 3 quotations and think, well, what does that show us about how he feels about his role, about how the fire and creating that fire makes him feel? So here I could talk about semantic field of power and authority. Remember, semantic fields are just 3 linked grouped quotations or 3 groups of words. Montague feels empowered and skilled in his job. The metaphor amazing conductor evokes notions of responsibility and control, as though he has control over the fire and it makes him feel powerful. All the symphonies is hyperbole because it exaggerates all the symphonies, and it emphasizes the magnitude of his task and the pride he takes in the task, that he feels that he's like a powerful conductor and he can control all of this flame all at once. It's as though he has the ultimate power at his fingertips. If we wanted to then look for some quotations to describe the fire itself, we've got the personification, the house jumped up in a gorging flame. I love the use of the word gorging flame, as though it feeds upon the house, as though it's parasitic, this fire that spreads and eats into anything it passes through. Red and yellow and black, that listing and use of that semantic field of colour, we can analyse those words because particular colours have particular connotations. So I always really like it when I see words for colour in a text, because there's a lot you can say about what those words associate with and what we connect them with when we read. So personification, the house jumped up, shows us that the fire dominates and destroys the buildings. The dynamic verb gorging makes it suggest the fire is greedy for more things to destroy, that it's parasitic and feeding on this house. But the semantic field of colour, colours like red indicate anger, but also colours like yellow could be indicative of danger and fear, while black could be indicative of decay. So it's kind of this idea of corruption alongside excitement at the same time. We've also got words like the books went up in sparkling whirls, blew away on a wind turned dark with burning. And I like sparkling whirls. This is the imagery of beauty and value, as though Montague finds a strange beauty in the burning of the books. That's the impact it has on him. It indicates the pleasure he takes in watching the fire, sparkling whirls. He thinks it's almost beautiful to watch the fire devour things. Whirls and wind, not only is that alliteration, but it's also pathetic fallacy, the use of the wind. And in literature, we have this motif of the winds of change, which you might be familiar with from Lord of the Flies, that the wind signifies transformation in some way, that something is set to change. So there's the possibility here that the wind could symbolise danger or transformation, that Montague's job and way of life is going to change. And this links to blood pounded earlier on in the extract, the idea that he feels joy and passion when he describes the blood pounding in his head, the impact it has on him. So that metaphor again, that hyperbole of the blood pounding, emphasises the pleasure he takes. So again here you've got for question 2, this is the actual method. We've just annotated a huge number of devices there, and we've got our language structure now. So what we do to do this is the method that we'll use for 8 marks. Firstly, the writer uses. So we're just going to say firstly, secondly, furthermore, for each of the paragraphs that we discussed, just to connect it is helpful. The writer uses, and then I'm going to add in a device. So I'm going to use my device such as, for instance, the semantic field or the use of the pathetic fallacy, whichever one I like. Then I'm going to give my quotation from the annotations we've just made. Then I'm going to explore the effect. I'm going to say this suggests, this indicates, this signifies, and I must make sure that I keep referring back to the fire and the effect the fire is having on Montague, and I must keep using those words again and again and again. But I'm going to keep on analysing as far as I can go. If you think about the structure of appeal, this is basically a P, E, because I'm going to keep going as far as I can with as many different layers of interpretation. This highlights, this exemplifies, however, this could also signify. When I've said everything I can say, I'm also going to then give another device. And so there are some verbs of inference on the left-hand side, but there are some verbs of analysis too. And actually the ones on the right-hand side might help you more effectively to talk about the effect on the reader. But then I'm going to name a smaller device or a single word, the use of the word something suggests, or the use of the abstract noun, put in the quotes, suggests, okay? And I'm going to give my micro quotations, and again, I'm going to explore the effect. And for those 8 marks, I need to use quotations including micro quotations, which is why we do the L point in our peel paragraph. We select a single word. I must use devices, and I must talk about the effect on the reader. But it is really important that every quotation I select and every effect I'm talking about relates back to the key word in the question, the fire, and its effect on Montague. When you've done that, then there are some things for you to do. This is a 10-mark question. So when you've spent, sorry, it's an 8-mark 10-minute question. So when you've spent about 10 minutes on the question, here is some self-assessment for you to do at the end. So use your red pen, and in your paragraphs I want you to tick every time you use a quote, and you could just put Q if you prefer, tick and put Q. Tick every time you've used a language device. You could put D for device or T for technique, whichever one you want, and E for effect on the reader. And if you've got all of those in your answer, yours is a good answer. But again, if you look at the things that are in brackets in the can I criteria, those are the things that are going to help you get up into the higher bands. So can you use smaller, more precise devices? Have I got 2 devices per paragraph? Can I select not just big quotations of about 5 or 6 words, but shorter micro quotations, single words, and really focus in on what those words mean? Can I have specific detailed analysis of effect on the reader without saying things that are quite vague and general, like this creates a clear picture, this makes it stand out, etc. So I want you to give yourself a mark out of 10 for each area of the criteria. For quotations, language devices, and effect on the reader. 1 if you think not secure in this skill. 10 if you think complete mastery of this skill, or any of the kind of scale in between, and that will give you an idea about what you need to work on in future. I'll also upload a further kind of assessment and feedback video on what a really good paragraph on this text might look like, so that you can also watch that as well after you've had a go at doing your own and see how your paragraph compares to the kind that I've constructed, okay, as a model for you. Right, well done. You can see that video and all the feedback that will be online after the fact, and there are also further tasks for you to do. Your home learning this week is to view the feedback videos based on the 2 additional extract questions from Romeo and Juliet. That was last week's independent work, and those videos have me working through the annotations for a couple of extract questions. I want you to complete a full exam answer on that question we've just planned for Fahrenheit 451. I want you to have a go at producing some cue cards or some PowerPoint slides or a mind map for your language devices with examples. And then there are 2 additional extract questions online for you to have a go at. If you really, really want to push yourself, you can also have a go at a bit of creative writing inspired by Fahrenheit 451. And again, there is a description there at the bottom. Feel free to pause this to read the full explanation here, and the additional resources will all be on the VLE. Well done.